The advice was this: walk in, shake their hand, say, sounds like you've been interested in trialing this piece of equipment in the past. Let it sit and ask them a very simple question from there. What do we need to do to make that happen now?
This is the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast, featuring tips from top performers, delivered like a conversation over cocktails. Listen in to glean wisdom from the best of the best and accelerate your results for years to come. Now, here are your hosts, Zed Williamson and Clark Wiederhold.
Welcome to the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast, a podcast for you if you care about driving your numbers in the up direction. I'm Zed Williamson, CEO of TrackableMed, and we're going to switch it up a little bit today because we are lucky enough to have on our staff at TrackableMed, Clark Wiederhold, Chief Sales Officer. But before joining us, Clark spent more than a decade in the medtech space, sales leadership. He has had some successes, some failures. He understands some of the things, the trials and tribulations of medtech sales. Clark, welcome.
Thanks, Zed. Appreciate it. So think about that customer, that target that's out there. You're sending your best salespeople in. They're having conversations. They can get meetings at any given time. They can walk in and have conversations, go in the back door. They'll sit down and have lunch with you. But they never quite move the needle. That customer never takes, or they never become a customer. It never really takes action. Those are some of the trials and tribulations, some of the tactical frustrations that happen on a daily basis. So how is it that a green salesperson can walk in, not have an appointment, and yet move the needle and get the customer to take action on something that hasn't happened in the past?
Wait a second. So there's really only two ways this can go. You have these reps that know all kinds of details. They're technical geniuses, and they're going in and maybe they're kind of forcing the move, right? They're going to badger the person. No doesn't exist in their language, and they're just going to keep hammering this customer until they buy. There's that person. Or the other approach is, oh, shoot, I'm afraid this is pending business right now. You know, what if I do something to upset them? And then I lose ground. So then that person just does the, hey, just checking in. You think any more about that stuff to think about? Those are the only two ways, right? You're saying there's something different?
Well, I'm saying two things can be right at the same time, right? You can achieve both by going in with some very specific intention. And I'm also saying that I've witnessed, the needle get moved by a sales professional that didn't have all of the technical expertise and knowledge that happens over time with a particular technology and a new organization that they're with. So imagine that customer we talked about earlier, and your sales rep walking in today doesn't have all of the knowledge that they would need to crush the case or crush the trial from a technical perspective. But they're walking in, and the history is a lot of really good sales pros have attacked this particular target without ever actually getting that target to take action. In this particular scenario, they were going after a capital purchase, right? And this client had agreed to a trial in the past, but they could never actually get the implementation to kick off. And without the trial, there is no sale. Without the sale, it's as if it didn't exist. All the while, you've got sales reps and sales leaders looking at this in the pipeline and just wondering when it's going to come to fruition, right? So you magnify that one scenario over the course of 2, 3, 10 opportunities across a region or the country. It really starts to magnify itself from a projection perspective.
Yeah, your forecasts are all out of whack.
Exactly.
Pending business. I hate that word, by the way, pending.
Yeah, but it's the deal that's coming that never comes.
Right.
So take a step back and realize that to get the action, you need some buy-in from the customer. But at the same time, one thing that a lot of very good and tenured sales reps will do is overlook some of the obvious and go in with what would be called cursive knowledge into the opportunity. Really want to knowledge up the customer and figure out and show why they're worthy of the trial.
The curse of knowledge, you talked about technical expertise. Curse of knowledge basically states that the more you know, chances are the less good you are at getting other people to understand. And what's interesting, I've seen this a lot with sales reps, is there are some people who really know their stuff. And that doesn't mean you're going to talk someone into doing something different. It's important. There are times in the relationship where you need to show that technical expertise, but just because you know doesn't mean someone is going to buy.
100%. And, there are times when we're talking about strategy and higher level, concepts and thinking. Today, we're really getting into some of the hand-to-hand combat, some tactical aspects of moving an opportunity forward, or at least really finding out where it sits, if it has any option of moving forward without closing the door for future opportunity as well.
So
and that's the key.
Yep.
Right?
It's very important. So let me pretend I am one of these people that's out there going, man, you are talking about my day. You were talking about what I expect to happen tomorrow. What can I do differently? What's step number one? What do I do?
Well, I'll go back to this story and I'll start to lay out what happened here. So had a team member that, again, they're green from a sales perspective, a lot of heart, a lot of soul. They're fighting. They're a grinder and a worker, right? And they're going to take the actions needed, but it's a matter of making the right actions. So there's this client, this target, I should say, super entrenched with competition in this particular scenario. Long-standing business relationship is developed into a very deep personal relationship as well. They're comfortable. If anything was an issue, it's that. They're super comfortable with where they are and they're doing well. That's a challenge. They're fine, right? Fine is the enemy of creating change. Likewise, there have been some really, really good sales professionals that have walked into this opportunity over the course of the last, prior to this, probably 7-8 years. And they've all had good standing with this target. They could walk in, they could have conversations. And again, this particular piece of capital in this story had already been teed up for a trial. The trial just never got off the ground.
Basically a fake yes. It's a yes because they don't want to hurt your feelings, but not a true yes, I'm moving forward.
It's exactly right. Yeah. We'll do that. And, go do all these things or whatnot, or really the reps in this scenario were really taking control, which isn't a bad thing, right? Because you want to be able to control your own destiny. The piece that had been missing in the past scenario, hindsight 2020, learning from previous mistakes, right, was that the customer had, or the target had, zero ownership into how that was actually going to unfold. So my team members walking me through this and having some historical knowledge of the scenario, we got to change it up. And they're not going to go in and explain from a technical perspective or a feature and benefit perspective why the customer really needs to take action on this. It's just, they don't have that yet. And this particular counterpart of mine didn't really, they're green. They're not super seasoned. They haven't bloodied their nose 1,000 times like some of us have, where you have those battle wounds and you've learned what not to do. So the advice was this: walk in, shake their hand, say, sounds like you've been interested in trialing this piece of equipment in the past. Let it sit and ask them a very simple question from there. What do we need to do to make that happen now? And those two things in combination create a good 1-2 punch, if you will, to just flat out call out what has happened in the past, get them thinking through, yeah, you're right, that was something I wanted to do. Or the opposite, right? I told you I wanted to, but I didn't. And then give them the ability to have control over what happens next.
So it seems like a really simple approach. And you might be sitting there going, well, of course, that would make sense to do. But let's break down the actual specified action, because you can do the same thing, and I'm saying that in air quotes, using different words and get a completely different outcome. So the first thing that you had the person say is you said, it sounds like you had interest. And that is much different than saying, why haven't you started the trial?
100%. And there's a lot of intention in the phrasing and the punch that you throw first. So the beginning of that is just consider it a bit of a cold read, if you will, but it's really, you know what's happened. And in this scenario, it's a different person coming in. So they're acknowledging what they know has happened in the past and getting them to start thinking through, getting the target to start thinking through the commitment they made. It's also giving them the ability to level set and say, yeah, we said that, but.
Right. You're giving them an out, which as a salesperson, that might seem a little scary. Like, well, wait a second, I don't want to give them out. But here, guess what? Either you're going to have the false yes for the rest of your life, or you're going to learn the information to be able to take the appropriate step to move it forward. That's why I'm not a big fan of that word pending business, because it's kind of this idea of, well, we'll just see if that, helium balloon floats back here one day. That's not the way sales works very well. So the idea of that statement, you're not challenging them. You're saying, this is what I understand from my perspective, and it hands it over to them to either agree or disagree. Both are awesome scenarios. They agree, then now you can move from there. They disagree, now you can take a step back and understand what's the right next step.
100%, right? And you're not saying, I know you were willing to take, you committed to a trial in the past. That's not going to play in your favor. It's really specific. It sounds like, or it seems like you, right, puts it in their control. It's a statement. It's not a question. And therefore, you're going to elicit a very honest and real response, even if it's something that they've got to think through for a second, as opposed to starting off with a question, especially why, and we'll get into that, right? But starting off with a question where they feel like they need to answer in a particular manner that you want to hear. For one, maybe to get out of the conversation, right? Two, to maybe make it less painful. And then that, it's really called a label, right? You can call it acknowledging resistance as well. It's another term for it in certain circumstances. But when you label out what either has happened or is potentially in the back of their mind, you're opening up the ability for them to just answer you honestly. And now you will have a truer instance, or a truer, I guess I should say, idea of where to go.
Yeah, because what you're doing is, because you're labeling the scenario, you're telling them your perspective, and someone will either agree with it or disagree, and there's no harm done. The difference of that is, let's play out the scenario. I go in and I say, hey, you've had a trial potentially scheduled for a while. Why haven't you done it? And that seems like a normal question to ask, right? And it's the worst thing a salesperson could do. I'll say right now, salespeople, you should probably strike that word from your vocabulary, the word why, because you just attacked them. May sound strange, but that's what you did.
Yeah. Why is always going to put somebody in a defensive mode, whether they realize it or recognize it or not. It's the difference between me saying, why'd you wear a gray jacket today? Versus, what made you decide to wear a gray jacket today? Right. And the why just automatically makes, no matter who it is on the other side of that, conversation, that question, feel as if they've got to defend that.
Yeah, I've been attacked. Well, what's wrong with my gray jacket?
Yeah, exactly. So you're setting it up with an observation, right? An observation of the past, an observation of what's happened before this. And then you let that sit, some dynamic silence, if you will. And if there is no reaction at that point, you come in with, what I'll refer to as a calibrated question from folks that really influence me. It's what it's called. But specifically, you're asking a what or a how question. And I actually misspoke a little bit about the way the story unfolded earlier. It was, what kept it from moving forward was the question. Because the way we were crafting this communication with my team member was identify the past and then understand what kept it from moving forward. And based on that answer, we would know, we'd uncover a lot, and we'd know what pitfalls to avoid moving forward if we were able to. Now, then following that up was, you could label it again, and you had two things to do. Sounds like you're still willing to take a look at this piece of equipment. And the follow-up question to that is, how do we move forward from here? And the power of that, ever so slight twist, right? And it's simple, but it's not easy, is it puts them in control. But at the same time, they're literally laying out for you exactly the steps that are needed to take place. And it was their idea.
Yep. You presented them with a problem and you're allowing them to solve it for you. And so if we back that up and we break it down a little bit, a label, how does someone know that it's a label? It's something like, I'm going to talk about something else from my perspective. And so I'm going to use words like, it seems like, it feels like, it sounds like. That's a really good way to start a label, because now it's just my perspective. I'm not saying that this is the absolute scientific truth of gravity. It seems like, fill in the blank with something, the position you want them to understand that you are coming from. Is that a good way for someone to understand a label?
It absolutely is, right? So you're literally, when you drop I into something, it's a pattern interrupter, right? And you can say, hey, I heard you say, well, no, I didn't say that. What? You're putting words in my mouth, right? Versus it sounds like you are saying, or it sounds like this is the thought process you're using, whatever it may be, right? It just, that little shift from I heard you say, right? Which any of us that have been through 100 different professional sales courses, right? We've heard time after time, make sure you come back and repeat what you've heard for clarification and for confirmation. The intent is not wrong at all, but this shift, this 2 millimeter shift, if you'll call it that, right? From a neuroscience perspective, frees your counterpart up that you're talking to give you honest feedback as opposed to what they think they need to answer to a question. When you follow that up, or the response up, with the calibrated question, specifically what or how, you're leaving that person with the illusion of control, but you're guiding them towards the destination you want the conversation to go. It doesn't mean we're going to get the answer we want, but we're going to
get the real answer.
Yes, you're going to get the real answer. And you're also going to do it in a way that they feel good about, right? Because they felt in control. One of the main primal urges we have as human beings is to feel in control of a situation. And so when you leave that intact, even if it's a scenario where they're not your customer and they don't want to let you down or whatever it may be, right? Or they're just kind of aggravated that you're there that day. When they feel in control, you're going to get a real, raw, honest answer. And that's the way you can challenge what's happening and allow that door to be open for future opportunity. So you can accomplish both things that, at least in my experience, I've tried to do one or the other. Leave it open and have the door, available to go through in future opportunities, or just challenge it so hard, come off the top rope and leave scorched earth. And I found something out, but if it didn't go my favor that time, I didn't have another opportunity later.
It's interesting because sometimes we can think that we actually can create something that they're not going to do. And that's not the way sales works. You can have the sales approach of, let me just take as many shots as possible and I'll land enough that'll make me successful. Here's what that success looks like. Up and down, up and down, up and down. You're a rock star one day, and then Murphy's Law puts you in the doghouse the next day. Or you can be someone who communicates with the purpose of understanding results or outcome. And now you're setting yourself on a trajectory that's going to constantly going up. Why? Because you're not going to be spending time on someone who is never going to buy. Because let's go back to this scenario. I know we're beating this one to death, but imagine you came and you said, hey, it sounds like you're interested in doing a trial. And the person goes, you know what? I really wasn't. I was just trying to be nice. Well, man, if this is impossible, we don't need to keep spending the time just trying to tear this down when it's not going to happen. I'd rather put my time with another potential customer. And that's what these tools give you, is you really understand where the person's coming from. And a tool like this, like labeling in calibrated questions or how and what questions, it can feel strange because it sounds so simple, but then how do you remember to do it? And then does that make you uncomfortable? So then you stumble in other things. We get that. There's one thing that we put together, and you can visit medicalsalesaccelerator.com, enter your email address and download the behavior change blueprint. What the behavior change blueprint is it's based on some similar ideas. It's 3 very specific scenarios that you can take and put into your business today. And it helps walk you through how and why you would use these things. It's the behavior change blueprint at medicalsalesaccelerator.com.
Yeah. So coming back to that story for a second, that rep walks in, they identify, they ask a couple of calibrated questions, and literally without an appointment, without a meeting, they spoke to the 2 key players while those surgeons were in between patients. Literally, it's that scenario we've all been in 1,000 times. They're in and out of rooms. You're standing at the corner. They see you. Hey, Clark, what you got? I got 2 minutes. And not only did he walk out with a commitment to a trial, but they literally gave him exactly what to do from there. And they took action on their cell phone. One of them did before he left, simply because he was explaining what needed to happen in this scenario. Next thing, trial moves forward. They had the trial, and now there's action taking place. So what was an opportunity that was in a rut, if you will, in that never land of, they said they would, but nothing's happening. Now it's moving. There's action being taken, right? So we mentioned earlier, you don't have to have all the technical aspects of it, right? Let's get real clear. To get to the dance, you don't have to know how to dance, but when you get there, you better have some moves, right? So you've got to know, and everybody that's listening to this podcast, whether you're in marketing, sales, or whatever, leadership role, and it's been a while since you've been in the field, we all know that when you get in that case and those technical opportunities, you have to be an expert at your piece of that procedure. There's no getting around that, right? You can absolutely lose the opportunity when you get there, but you don't necessarily have to leverage that at the beginning in all scenarios. In fact, in some cases, our curse of knowledge of all of that expertise with, our part of that therapy or piece of equipment can hinder the process moving forward, because some of that stuff just isn't important to them taking action and moving forward with the opportunity.
Yep. You can talk someone out of a plan that they were moving towards you. I've seen it dozens and dozens of times. And if you're out there and you're thinking, okay, well, now what do I do though? Okay, this sounds fine and dandy. So today, think about somebody that you're expecting to take action that hasn't. Just think of 1 or 2 people and just think of a label that you can use with them next time. And just think about, if you're expecting them to do A, just come back to them and say, hey, it sounds like, and then fill in the blank, and let them really tell you where they are in the scenario.
One thing about these tools, when you start implementing them, you're going to get a lot more information. You're going to get very raw information, right? Because what they do in combination and standalone in certain instances, take the label, for instance, the label elicits a raw response. And all we're looking for when we're trying to narrow down opportunity is, where do things really stand, and what's the piece of information I don't know that's holding this up or keeping me from having a real shot. And you mentioned having a sales process just continue to go on and on as if it's on a hamster wheel, right? The pending opportunity. Nothing eats up more of our time than the brain cells we use thinking about how to move an opportunity that's been pending for 2 weeks, 6 months, whatever it may be. Move that forward. The actions we take, the gas we burn, the hours we spend going to an opportunity to try to get something to move forward, because we don't really know what's holding it up. These tactics, these tools layered into your strategy and your sales process, these communication tools will move your needle forward faster. It's the way our brain is put together. The neuroscience behind it proves that you do these small shifts in the way you speak, you're going to get big results.
Yeah, and speaking of neuroscience, TrackableMed is a company that's rooted in it. Everything that TrackableMed does is based on the understanding of neuroscience. And you can go out and read hundreds of books. There's some extraordinary books out there that gives you all of the science, and you can start putting together these things, these tools. But I know, Clark, you have a recommendation of a book that actually kind of has done the work for you from the neuroscience standpoint and brought it into one spot?
I do. There's a lot of good information out there, but if you're going to pick up another book moving forward, I highly recommend Never Split the Difference from Chris Voss. And if you're looking for more information, more detail on some of the things we've talked about today, the label, the calibrated questions, this goes into detail into not only what it is, but why they work and how to leverage them. I've certainly been highly influenced by Chris Voss's work and the conglomerate of concepts and really neuroscience that they pulled together with his time out of the FBI and the way the book's set up. But from a book perspective, I know that this community, this audience, we take in a lot of content, a lot of information. It's just everybody's always trying to up their game. And it's one of the things I love about the MedTech community. This book is very actionable. It's very tactical. It's not a strategic book, but it's also not real philosophical either, right? It's going to give you very actionable things that you can put into play whether you're communicating, upstream on the marketing side, downstream on the marketing side, communicating outward towards customers or your internal customers within your organization. I mean, honestly, it helps create communication with results, as we call it, throughout all of the interactions you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely recommend it as well. If anyone out there, you might be pondering some scenarios that you have, feel free to shoot us a note at medicalsalesaccelerator.com. If you want to just chat through a scenario that you're thinking about, how would I label this? We'll talk to you about it. We love this stuff. So please always feel free to do that. And also remember, go to medicalsalesaccelerator.com to download the behavior change blueprint. If you like the episode, jump on to wherever you listen to your podcast and rate it. Lots of fancy stars with brilliant comments about how much you enjoyed it. If you didn't like it, you don't need to waste your time doing that kind of stuff anyway. Clark, it's been great talking to you today. If people out there have a suggestion for guests, also feel free to suggest those. And thank you so much for listening.
Have a great week, everybody. Thank you.